The scorpion is an uncommunicative creature, secret in his practices, and disagreeable to deal with, so that his history, apart from anatomical detail, amounts to little or nothing. The scalpel of the experts has made us acquainted with his organic structure, but no observer, as far as I know, has thought of interviewing him with any sort of persistence on the subject of his private habits. Ripped up after being steeped in spirits of wine, he is very well known. Acting within the domain of his instincts, he is hardly known at all. And yet none of the segmented animals is more deserving of a detailed biography. He has at all times appealed to the popular imagination, even to the point of figuring among the signs of the zodiac. Fear made the gods, said Lucretius, deified by terror. The scorpion is immortalized in the sky by a constellation and in the almanac by the symbol for the month of October. I made the acquaintance of the Languedocian scorpion, Scorpio occitanus, lat, half a century ago in the Villeneuve Hills on the far side of Rhone, opposite Avignon. When the thrice blessed Thursday came. Thursday is a whole holiday in the French schools. At this time, the author was a schoolmaster at Avignon. When the thrice blessed Thursday came, from morning till night I used to turn over the stones in quest of the Scolopendra. Scolopendra cingulata, the centipede. The chief subject of the thesis which I was preparing for my doctor's degree. Sometimes, instead of that magnificent horror, the mighty myriapod, I would find, under the raised stone, another and no less unpleasant recluse. It was he, with his tail turned over his back and a drop of poison gleaming at the end of the sting. He lay displaying his pincers at the entrance of a burrow. Brr! Have done with the formidable creature. The stone fell back into its place. Utterly tired out, I used to return from my excursions rich in Scolopendrae, and richer still in those illusions which paint the future rose color when we first begin to bite freely into the bread of knowledge. Science, the witch! I used to come home with joy in my heart. I had found some centipedes. What more was needed to complete my ingenious happiness? I carried off the Scolopendrae and left the scorpions behind, not without a secret feeling that a day would come when I should have to concern myself with them. 50 years have elapsed, and that day has come. It behoves me, after the spiders, his near neighbors in organization, to cross-examine my old acquaintance, chief of the arachnids in our district. It so happens that the Languedocian scorpion abounds in my neighborhood. Nowhere have I seen him so plentiful as on the Serignan hills, with their sunny rocky slopes, beloved by the arbutus and the arborescent heath. There the chilly creature finds a subtropical temperature and also a sandy soil, easy to dig. This is, I think, as far as he goes towards the north. His favorite spots are the bare expanses, poor in vegetation, where the rock outcropping in vertical strata is baked by the sun and worn by the wind and rain until it ends by crumbling into flakes. He is usually found in colonies, at quite a distance from one another, as though the members of a single family, migrating in all directions, were becoming a tribe. It is not sociability. It is anything but that, excessively intolerant and passionately devoted to solitude. They continually occupy their shelters alone. In vain do I seek them out. I never find two of them under the same stone. Or, to be more accurate, when there are two, one is engaged in eating the other. We shall have occasion to see the savage hermit ending the nuptial festivities in this fashion. The lodging is very rough and ready. Let us turn over the stones, which are generally flat and fairly large. The scorpion's presence is indicated by a cavity as wide as the neck of a quart bottle and a few inches deep. In stooping, we commonly see the master of the house on the threshold of his dwelling, with his pincers outspread and his tail in the posture of defense. At other times, when he owns a deeper cell, the hermit is invisible. We have to use a small pocket trowel to bring him out into the light of day. Here he is, lifting or brandishing his weapon. Where, fingers? I take him by the tail with a pair of tweezers and slip him, head foremost, into a stout paper bag, which will isolate him from the other prisoners. The whole of my formidable harvest goes into a tin box. In this way, both the collecting and the transport are carried out with perfect safety. Before housing my animals, let me briefly describe them. The common black scorpion, Scorpio europaeus, Lin, is known to all. He frequents the dark holes and corners near our dwelling places. On rainy days in autumn, he makes his way indoors, sometimes even under our bedclothes. The odious animal causes us more fright than damage. Although not rare in my present abode, the results of its visits are never in the least serious. The weird beast, overrated in reputation, is repulsive rather than dangerous. Much more to be feared and much less well known generally is the Languedocian scorpion, resident in the Mediterranean provinces. Far from seeking our habitations, he lives apart, in the untilled solitudes. Besides the black scorpion, he is a giant who, when full grown, measures 3 to 3.5 inches in length. His coloring is the yellow of faded straw. The tail, which is really the animal's abdomen, is a series of 5 prismatic segments, shaped like little kegs, whose staves meet in undulating ridges resembling strings of beads. Similar cords cover the arms and forearms of the nippers and divide them into long facets. Others meander along the back like the joints of a cuirass, whose seams are adorned with a freakish milled edging. These bead-like protuberances give the scorpion's armor a fierce and robustious appearance, which is characteristic of the Languedocian scorpion. It is as though the animal were fashioned out of chips hewn with an adze. The tail ends in a 6th joint, which is smooth and vesicular. This is the gourd in which the poison, a formidable fluid resembling water in appearance, is elaborated and held in reserve. A dark, curved, and very sharp sting completes the apparatus. A pore, visible only under the lens, opens at some distance from the point. Through this, the venomous liquid is injected into the puncture. The sting is very hard and very sharp. Holding it between my fingertips, I can push it through a sheet of cardboard as easily as if I were using a needle. Owing to its bold curve, the sting points downwards when the tail is extended in a straight line. To make use of his weapon, therefore, the scorpion must raise it, turn it over, and strike upwards. This, in fact, is his invariable practice. In order to pink the adversary subdued by the nippers, the tail is arched over the animal's back and brought forward. The scorpion, for that matter, is almost always in this position. Whether in motion or at rest, he arches his tail over his back. He very rarely drags it behind him, relaxed into a straight line. The pincers, those buccal hands recalling the claws of the crayfish, are organs of battle and of information. When moving forwards, the scorpion holds them in front of him, with the 2 fingers opened to take stock of objects encountered on the way. When he wants to stab an enemy, the pincers seize the foe and hold him motionless, while the sting is brought into play over the assailant's back. Lastly, when he wishes to nibble a bit at leisure, they serve as hands and hold the prey within the reach of the mouth. They are never used for walking, for stability, or for excavation. That is the function of the real legs. These are suddenly truncated and end in a group of short, movable claws, faced by a short, fine point, which, to some extent, serve as a thumb. The stump is finished off with rough bristles. The whole constitutes an excellent grapnel, which explains the scorpion's aptitude for roaming over the trellis work of my wire gauze covers, for making long halts there, motionless and upside down, and, lastly, for scrambling along a vertical wall, notwithstanding his clumsiness and weight. Underneath, just behind the legs, are the combs, those strange organs, and an exclusive attribute of the scorpions. They owe their name to their structure, consisting of a long row of plates set close together like the teeth of a hair comb. The anatomists are inclined to ascribe to them the functions of a clutch intended to hold the couple bound together at the moment of pairing. We will leave it at that until we are better informed, provided that the specimens which I propose to rear tell me their secret. On the other hand, I know of another function which is very easily observed when the scorpion meanders. Belly uppermost, over the wire trellis of my dish covers. When he is at rest, the 2 combs are laid flat on the abdomen, behind the legs. The moment he begins to walk, they stick out on either side, at right angles to the body, like the naked wings of an unfledged nestling. They sway gently up and down, reminding us of the balancing pole of an inexperienced rope dancer. More recent opinion conceives the comb or picton as originally the respiratory organ of an aquatic ancestor of Scorpio, now probably serving as a guide or clasper when pairing. If the scorpion stops, they are at once retracted, fall back upon the belly, and cease to move. If he resumes his walk, they are at once extended and again begin their gentle oscillation. The animal, therefore, seems to use them at least as a balancing mechanism. The eyes, 8 in number, are divided into 3 groups. In the middle of that weird segment, which is at once head and thorax, 2 large and very convex eyes gleam side by side, reminding us of the Lycosa's superb lenses, the Narbonne lycosa, or black-bellied tarantula. They are, apparently, in both instances, for use at close range because of their great convexity. A ridge of protuberances arranged in a wavy line serve as an eyebrow and give them a fierce appearance. Their axis, which is almost horizontal, can hardly allow them more than lateral vision. The same remark applies to 2 other groups, each composed of 3 eyes, which are very small and placed much farther forward, nearly on the edge of the sudden truncation that forms an arch above the mouth. On both right and left, the 3 tiny lenses are set in a short straight line, their axis pointing laterally. On the whole, both the small and the large eyes are so arranged that it can by no means be easy for the animal to obtain a clear view ahead. Extremely short-sighted and squinting outrageously, how does the scorpion manage to steer himself? Like a blind man, he gropes his way. He guides himself with his hands, that is to say, his pincers, which he carries outstretched with the fingers open to sound the space before him. Watch 2 scorpions wandering in the open air in my rearing cages. A meeting would be disagreeable, sometimes even dangerous for them. Nevertheless, the one behind always goes ahead as though he did not perceive his neighbor. But as soon as he touches the other, ever so slightly with his pincers, he at once gives a sudden start, a sign of surprise and uneasiness. followed at once by a retreat and a change of direction. To recognize the irascible one thus overhauled, he had to touch him. Let us now install our prisoners. I shall never learn all I want to know by turning over stones and making chance observations on the adjacent hills. I must resort to keeping the animal in captivity, the only manner of inducing them to reveal their domestic habits. What rearing method shall I employ? One in particular appeals to me, one which will leave the creature its full liberty, which will relieve me of the cares of catering, and which will enable me to inspect my captives at any hour of the day, from year's end to end. This seems to me an excellent means, far superior to the others, so much so that I reckon on a magnificent success. It is a question of establishing within my own grounds, in the open air, a hamlet of scorpions, by cunning securing for them the same conditions of well-being which they enjoyed at home. In the first days of January, I found my colony right at the end of the harmas, the enclosed paddock or piece of wasteland used to study insects in their natural state. In the quiet corner exposed to the sun and sheltered from the north wind by a thick rosemary hedge. In the first days of January, I found my colony right at the end of the harmas, in the quiet corner exposed to the sun and sheltered from the north wind by a thick rosemary hedge. The ground, a mixture of pebbles and red clay soil, is unsuitable. Considering the temperament of my charges, great stay-at-homes, from what I can see, this is easily remedied. For each of my colonists, I dig a hole of a gallon or two in capacity and fill it with sandy earth similar to that of the original site. I pack this earth lightly, which will give it the consistence needed for digging without landslips, and in it I contrived a sort of entrance passage, the beginning of the excavation which the scorpion will not fail to make in order to obtain a cell in conformity with his tastes. A white flat stone covers and overlaps the hole. Opposite the passage of my own making, I scoop out a hollow. This is the entrance door. In front of the hollow, I place a scorpion taken that moment from the paper bag in which he has just been conveyed from the mountain. Seeing a retreat similar to those with which he is familiar, he goes in of his own accord and does not show himself again. In this way I established a hamlet, consisting of some 20 inhabitants, all adults. The dwellings, placed at a suitable distance from one another, to avoid the quarrels liable to occur among neighbors, are arranged in a row on a stretch of ground cleared with a rake. It will be easy for me to observe events at a glance, even at night, by the light of a lantern. As to food, I need not trouble about that. My guests will find their own provisions, for the spot is quite as well stocked with game as that from which I brought them. The colonies in the paddock are not enough. Certain observations call for minute attention, which is incompatible with the disturbances out of doors. A second menagerie is set up, this time on the large table in my study, a table around which I have already covered, and am still covering, so many miles in pursuit of stubborn knowledge. Bring up the big earthenware pans, my usual apparatus, filled with sifted sandy earth. Each receives 2 broad potsherds, which, half buried, form a ceiling and represent the refuge under the stones. The establishment is surrounded by the dome of a wire gauze cover. Here I house the scorpions, 2 by 2, and of different sexes, as far as I am able to judge. No outward characteristic that I know of distinguishes the males from the females. I take the big-bellied specimens for females and the less obese for males. As age intervenes with its variations of stoutness, mistakes are inevitable. Unless I open the subject's paunch, a procedure which would cut short any attempt at rearing. We will allow ourselves to be guided by size, since we have no other means of judging, and house the scorpions 2 by 2, one corpulent and brown, the other less obese and of a lighter color. There are certain to be some actual couples among the number.